The streets of London were alive with the hum of horse-drawn carriages and the chatter of a bustling crowd, but beneath the ordinary rhythm of the city, something extraordinary was unfolding. Women of all ages, from the modest to the well-heeled, moved with purpose, their faces set with determination and defiance. They were part of a silent army, a force that had been quietly building strength for years, a force that called itself the Suffragettes. Among these women was Emily Davison, a bright and educated woman who had once taught in schools but had grown tired of the limits placed on her and every woman she knew. Emily believed in equality, in a future where women could vote, own property, and have a say in the laws that governed their lives. But in 1913, this idea was still radical, even dangerous. Women were expected to stay silent, to tend to their homes and families, and to leave politics to men. But Emily, like many others, could no longer accept this. She had joined the Women's Social and Political Union, WSPU, a militant group fighting for women's suffrage, led by the formidable Emmeline Pankhurst. The government had ignored their peaceful protests for too long. They had tried petitions, speeches, and letters. They had stood in rain-soaked crowds, shouting their demands for equality, only to be dismissed and ridiculed. Now, they were ready to fight fire with fire. They began organizing daring acts of civil disobedience, chaining themselves to railings, smashing windows, and setting fire to mailboxes. Their motto was, "Deeds, not words." One June afternoon, the atmosphere in London was electric with anticipation. The Epsom Derby, one of England's most prestigious horse races, was underway, drawing crowds from all over the country, including King George V himself. Emily Davison, dressed in her best attire, moved quietly among the throngs of spectators. She had a plan, one that would force the world to take notice of their struggle. As the horses thundered around the track, Emily slipped under the railing and walked calmly onto the racecourse. She carried a scarf in her hand, the green, white, and purple colors of the suffragette movement. She aimed for Anmer, the king's horse, intending to attach the scarf to its bridle. She wanted to make a statement so bold, so shocking, that it would be impossible to ignore. She stepped into the path of the oncoming horses. In an instant, there was chaos. The crowd gasped, and the sound of pounding hooves filled the air. The king's horse collided with Emily, knocking her to the ground. The race came to a sudden halt. Emily was quickly taken to the hospital, but the damage was done, she never regained consciousness. 4 days later, she died. Emily's sacrifice sent shockwaves across the nation. The newspapers were filled with accounts of her bravery and speculation about her intentions. Was she a martyr, a reckless fanatic, or a symbol of a cause that could no longer be denied? Her funeral was attended by thousands of women dressed in white, carrying banners that read, "Fight on, God will give the victory." Emily Davison's death became a rallying cry for the suffragette movement. Across the country, women who had remained silent began to speak out, emboldened by her courage. Men who had dismissed their cause began to reconsider, moved by the strength and determination of women like Emily. The fight continued, and the suffragettes grew bolder in their actions, willing to endure arrest, imprisonment, and even force-feeding during hunger strikes. They were no longer content to wait patiently for change, they would force it, whatever the cost. In 1918, 5 years after Emily's death, the Representation of the People Act was passed, granting women over the age of 30 the right to vote. It was a hard-won victory, but it was only the beginning. The full enfranchisement of women came a decade later, in 1928, when the Equal Franchise Act was passed, granting all women over the age of 21 the right to vote, just like men. Emily Davison did not live to see the fruits of her sacrifice, but her story, and the stories of countless other suffragettes, paved the way for a new era. The silent rebellion was over, but its echoes continued to shape the future. A future where every voice counted, and where no woman would ever again be told to stay silent. Today we remember the courage and resilience of the suffragettes, women who refused to accept the status quo, who stood up against injustice and demanded their place in the world. Their struggle reminds us that progress often comes at a price, but it is a price worth paying for the promise of equality and justice. The suffragettes' fight was not just for the right to vote, it was a fight for recognition, for respect, and for the fundamental belief that all humans, regardless of gender, should have a say in shaping the world they live in. And so, the story of the suffragettes is not just history, it is a call to continue fighting for what is right, for what is just, and for a world where every person's voice can be heard.